Hello and welcome for part 2 of the Religious Studies book of Enoch, where we're going to talk about chapters 11 through 16. If you need links to the previous videos, including the live stream version of this video, then you can go ahead and check that out in the details section below. So we wanted to start off by looking up Azazel because we had learned some names of the Watchers, the ones that I refer to as the captain and the squad leaders, but Azazel shows up not only in that section, but also the section we're going to talk about, and he's not really described in there. It appears he's a Watcher. It seems that there was something that had to do with something, but for some reason he seems to be getting a lot of the brunt of the punishment from Yahweh. So why is that? Now, Azazel shows up actually in the Bible, and he shows up in Leviticus, but only in some translations. And so we end up with these commentaries here. This is from the New Living Translation, but it actually doesn't have his name in the King James Version. So I have this open just to kind of discuss in both ways. So this is referring to the scapegoat scenario. You may know this word in English, scapegoat, which is basically the thing that you blame for all of the problems to get all of the attention and responsibility sort of off of yourself. And that actually comes from this biblical event where you literally take two goats. One of them is sacrificed to Yahweh, and one of them is sent off in the wilderness for Azazel. Now, if you hear that without any context, you might think that perhaps these goats, because they're being both offered to Yahweh and to Azazel, that perhaps they're on some sort of equal footing, but that's not really the case. To sacrifice this animal to Yahweh is as if you were preparing a really delicious banquet for someone, whereas sending it off in the wilderness for Azazel to chase after, find, and receive, that's almost as if your dinner that you're preparing for someone is just a dry bowl of noodles, and then you let them know, hey, you know, the tea kettle's over there, the water kettle's over there, so you can go ahead and heat up the noodles yourself and rehydrate them. It's not exactly the same thing. You're sending these goats off into, or this one goat off into the wilderness after you have decided which one is for Yahweh and which one is for Azazel. The goats receive the sins of the town through this process. You can read about it in Leviticus 16 if you are interested. And the website I'm using is blueletterbible.org. You can also type in blb.org, and it's a great reference for biblical stuff. Now, we can see here that the casting the sacred lots, this is a type of vote to determine the goats, which of the goats is going to be sacrificed to Yahweh and which one will be sent off into the wilderness. And we can see his name actually shows up. But if we go to something like Leviticus 16:8, we see that it's just referring to the two goats, one goat for the Lord and the other is the scapegoat. Why Azazel's name doesn't show up here, I'm not entirely sure. And this ends up being a holiday, part of a holiday. It's still observed, but I don't know if people still observe it the same way, but it's the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur. So that is how that still kind of relates to today. So where we're going to continue on next time is starting off here, which means we are finishing this first section. The Book of Enoch is not like a single book by itself, it's in different parts. We ended on chapter 10, so we're going to go ahead and start on chapter 11. Now you will have to forgive me because you'll see a lot of this text getting really big. My eyes are not what they used to be, even with these gargantuan glasses on. So I might be highlighting parts of the text just to make it easier to read, which we'll especially see a little bit later as we get this bigger chapters that we run into. This is still Yahweh speaking, so he's speaking from chapter 10. So just as a refresher, or for those of you that weren't unable to watch it, the Watchers were this class of angels that were literally tasked with just watching the earth. They're sort of, I can't even really call them caretakers. They have information, special sacred information given from Yahweh about things like metallurgy and astronomy and astrology, as well as traditional medicine. You would call like herbalism or traditional medicine. They provided this to the humans. So the humans were not actually supposed to have any of this information. Why this was given to the Watchers, it's not really explained. So the Watchers have to observe humans And that's kind of it. The way I saw it is that the Watchers probably got quite bored. They weren't doing anything malicious or hateful against Yahweh. They just kind of got bored in their position, saw that they, really cared about these humans, fell in love with some of the women that they were observing, and decided to start families through what I would assume is an unexpected turn of events. It seems the Watchers had no idea that their children would be these horrible giants. And these are not the, church apologetics, oh, well, they're just tall for their time period giants. These are, when you do the calculation provided in the Book of Enoch, they end up being about 3.4 kilometers tall. These are mountains. These are giants that would exceed, the Cyclops from Greek mythology, for example. They're just huge. They're massive. And the giants themselves caused a lot of havoc on Earth, but again, it wasn't out of malice. It was just, they were hungry. That was sort of it. And so we end up with this situation that even the heavens didn't understand was going on. So this kind of gives you an idea of how the Watchers were sort of widely ignored. The archangels had no idea what was happening until they heard a big commotion among the souls trying to enter the gates of heaven and saying, hey, look at what's going on earth. There's something happening. The Watchers have done this thing. Then they realize the Watchers are gone. Then they realize all this stuff is happening on earth. So it just kind of lets you know what an unappreciated non-job the Watchers had, that they weren't supposed to interfere at all with the earth, and even in heaven, nobody was checking in on them or making sure that they're doing their job or anything like that. So it's sort of a sad situation, I would say, for the Watchers. Yahweh, hears about this. He gets very upset, and he decides to flood the earth, and that's when we get the Noah story. Noah was chosen not because he's an awesome guy, but he basically wasn't a Watcher. He wasn't affiliated with the Watchers, didn't seem to get any information from them, and his family did not interbreed with them. And so Noah's genetics were perfect in that they were still 100% human. And so that's why his family was spared from this flood. Yahweh, in chapter 10, his goal is to reset the earth and make it so everybody focuses on him again, worships him and gives him adoration, doesn't get lost in this, pursuit of knowledge kind of thing, just to focus back on him again. So now he's continuing to say, and in those days I will open up the store chambers of blessing, which are in the heaven, so as to send them down upon the earth over the work and labor of the children of men. And truth and peace shall be associated together throughout all the days of the world and throughout all the generations of men, which of course did not happen after the flood. So, not even trying to discuss whether a flood even happened historically, just within the religious text. Obviously, after the flood had ended, it's not as if there was peace and happiness on earth. So this is a bit of an interesting statement, because the Book of Enoch was written much later after the Torah, but before the New Testament, and it just seems odd that somebody would include this. So this could be a reference to the new earth, which would be like a post-Armageddon sort of thing. If you guys want to know more about that, please ask or read Revelations. So these next sections are about Enoch. Okay, so Enoch is now tasked with writing information down, talking to the Watchers, and then the Watchers have him write information down and talk to Yahweh on his behalf. Before these things, the things are all the events that had happened with the Watchers, the giants, and the flood. Before these things, Enoch was hidden, and no one of the children of men knew where he was hidden and where he abode and what had become of him. And his activities had to do with the Watchers, and his days are with the holy ones. So this is basically saying, hey, Enoch just kind of disappeared before all of this happened. Now Enoch is talking. And I, Enoch, was blessed with the Lord of majesty and the King of the ages. And lo, the watchers called me, Enoch the scribe, and said to me, Enoch, thou scribe of righteousness, go declare to the watchers of the heaven, who have left the high heaven, the holy eternal place, and have defiled themselves with women, and have done as the children of earth do, and have taken upon themselves wives. So this whole thing is them insulting the watchers. We're going to get a lot of insults in this section. Yahweh himself is probably the greatest of insulters. So here we're being told that basically, hey, you know those watchers? Yeah, do you remember those guys? The ones that were in heaven and everything was fine and everything was righteous, and then they had to go mess everything up? Yeah, go tell them this message. So that's this attitude that we're having here. Ye have wrought great destruction on the earth, and ye shall have no peace, nor forgiveness of sin. And inasmuch as they delight in themselves and their children, the murder of their beloved ones shall they see, and over the destruction of their heart, over the destruction of their children shall they lament, and shall they make supplication unto eternity, but mercy and peace shall ye not attain. And again, this is sort of, if you're just reading the words, and it seems very flowery in a way because it's written in English that we don't use anymore, this is just a really big insult to injury. So Yahweh is basically instructing Enoch to go to the watchers and tell them, listen, as much as you have loved your children, you shall despair, because I'm going to destroy them. We're going to make sure everything is terrible, and you're just going to be hanging out, unforgiven, unable to contact your families that you've made, knowing it was your actions that caused this. And I will never, ever, ever, ever forgive you of any of this that you've done. So the watchers, again, I don't think that they intended for any of this to happen. I don't think they intended to cause such havoc. I think they were just genuinely caring for humans. And in the live stream, we talked about farmers and how farmers care for their animals. And I think in a way, that's kind of how the watchers felt. This really loving compassion for humans, to the point that they fell in love with humans. And once they decided to go down and have families with them, I assume that they would have made friends. They would have been happy to share this information. Hey, you guys are having trouble trying to do this. I know metallurgy. Let me teach it to you guys. Oh, you're trying to deal with an upset stomach. I have a great remedy for that. Let me teach it to you. So these are caretakers of the earth that love the earth. They love humans. And what happens? They ruin the earth somehow. And now they have to suffer for this, knowing that all of the people were killed by this flood except for Noah and his family. These animals that they loved were killed by this flood as well. And that's what Yahweh's telling them. Not only am I doing this to you, but I'm reminding you that this is why. So this is such a spitting in the face of them. So what happens now in chapter 13? So Enoch goes to Azazel and he says, basically, hey, this is what Yahweh wants me to tell you. He says, thou shalt have no peace. A severe sentence has gone forth against thee to put thee into bonds. So you're in prison. And thou shalt not have toleration nor request granted to thee because of the unrighteousness which thou hast taught, and because of all the works of godlessness and unrighteousness and sin which thou hast shown to men. So this, again, is you're punished for sharing knowledge. Kind of sucks for Azazel. Then I, Enoch, went and spoke to them together, and they were all afraid, and fear and trembling seized them. Can you imagine that? Imagine that you are a farmer, to use that analogy again, and somehow chickens are sentient beings that are able to communicate with you very freely. And now, knowing that you have destroyed all the chickens on the earth that you have loved, something that you've done accidentally has destroyed your most beloved type of farm animal, okay? now it comes up to you. One of them that was spared all of this comes up to you, ready to give you the message from like the ultimate chicken, okay? And I know it sounds a bit silly if we talk about it with chickens, but I want you guys to understand that this is such a strange situation for the Watchers. They are charged with taking care of the earth, and now this thing from the earth is charged with insulting them, sharing this information from their boss, Yahweh. So it's such a very strange kind of situation for them. You know, how do you behave? Do you outrank the humans? Well, not when one of them is speaking on behalf of Yahweh. What can you do? You want to make sure that you don't make a mistake. So what they're going to do now is they're going to ask Enoch, is it possible for you to explain to Yahweh what's going on? So they basically have this petition that they want to present it to heaven. And I don't want to read absolutely everything. You guys can check this out for yourselves. But basically, they are punished to the point that they can't even ask for forgiveness. They can't even look upward to heaven. So Enoch writes down their petition, and he starts reading it out to God, or to Yahweh, and he falls asleep as he's doing so. As he's sleeping, he receives an answer from Yahweh. So he's told to explain this thing to the Watchers. The Watchers receive this message and say, hey, please talk to Yahweh on our behalf. We're not even allowed to ask him for forgiveness. We can't speak to him at all. So he's took that information, and now Yahweh is answering in the form of a vision that Enoch receives dreaming. Okay, so this is the longer chapter, which is why I don't want to go through all of it. You can watch that in the live version as well. But one of the interesting things is that, first of all, Yahweh is just saying, well, I'm not going to even listen to your petition. I don't care. And my answer is no. You will never be forgiven, and I hate all of you, and you did terrible things. Okay? But what's very interesting here is this vision of this region. And it appears that Enoch actually goes to heaven. So I just kind of do want to read this as well. So, and the vision was shown to me thus. Behold, in the vision clouds invited me, and a mist summoned me, and the course of the stars and the lightnings sped and hastened me, and the winds in the vision caused me to fly, and lifted me upward, and bore me into heaven. That's pretty freaky, right? Suddenly there's a bunch of weird mist that says, yo, Enoch, get up here. And then lightning is, clashing around you, and you're spinning up, being taken literally up into heaven. And I went until I drew nigh to a wall, which is built of crystals and surrounded by tongues of fire. And it began to affright me. And just imagine that. You're taken upward, hoping you don't fall down, right? Imagine how scary that would just be drawn upwards into the sky, right? And now you see this crystalline wall. What's behind this wall, you're not really sure, and it's just covered in fire, these like lapping flames. It's very scary looking. When we first read through this, I thought that it was actually a reference to hell, and that Enoch was being shown where the Watchers would be tortured forever in this crystalline flaming prison, and it turns out this is where Yahweh is. So it's quite interesting. So I'll continue. And the tongues of fire and I went to the tongues of fire and drew nigh to a large house which was built of crystals, and the walls of the house were like a tessellated floor made of crystals, and its groundwork was of crystal. Its ceiling was like the path of the stars and the lightnings, and between them were fiery cherubim, and their heaven was clear as water. For those of you who do not know what cherubim look like, they are not at all like the little child, chubby, baby-looking angels with these little sweet wings on them. If you are watching or looking at this video, there is an image or some images of what the cherubim look like. If you're just listening to this, basically you have 3 sets of wings, and depending on how they're depicted, you basically can only see their face. Sometimes their faces are covered, but usually that's for seraphim to cover their face. Their bodies are usually very difficult to see. You can see some other artist rendition here. They're very difficult to see. They also have different faces on them, which is also kind of kind of scary. They have animal faces that are facing different sides of their head. So like one face forward might look human, but then on the left side it's like another animal's face, and on the right side and behind it's another face still. So these are frightening looking things. If you ever saw a cherubim, you would, evacuate yourself, to say the least. Their wings have eyeballs on them. It's a very frightening looking creature, for sure. So now this creature that is multi-faced, multi-winged, covered in eyeballs, in this crystalline, fiery room. I mean, that is frightening. That is a frightening vision, for sure. Let's see. So heaven was as clear as water. A flaming fire surrounded the walls, and its portals blazed with fire. Portals in this case, they're going to be things like windows, mirrors, and doors. So that's what they mean by portals. And as I entered the house, it was hot as fire and cold as ice, and there were no delights of life therein. Fear covered me, and trembling got hold upon me. Now you can see why I thought that he was describing hell. This is not, the types of things, especially if you saw any Chick tracts or anything like that, how they depict God on his throne. It's nothing like this. It's very scary. This is very, very scary. And imagine being burning hot and freezing cold at the same time. It's like my migraine days, it's a not a good time. And as I quaked and trembled, I fell upon my face, and I beheld a vision, and lo, there was a second house greater than the former, and the entire portal, in this case would be the door, stood open before me, and it was built of flames of fire. So it's a door that's open, and the door is made of fire. I mean, just absolutely frightening. And in every respect, it so excelled in splendor and magnificence and extent that I cannot describe to you its splendor and extent. And its floor was of fire, and above it were lightnings and paths of stars, and its ceilings was also flaming fire. And I looked and saw therein a lofty throne. Its appearance was as crystal, and the wheels thereof as the shining sun. And there was a vision of cherubim. So these wheels are going to be on the throne. Probably not like giant wheels like a wheelchair, but more smaller wheels to move the throne around more easily. And underneath the throne came streams of flaming fire, so that I could not look thereon. I mean, wow, that's a very metal kind of throne, you know what I mean? that's very metal. And the great glory, this is Yahweh, sat thereon, and his raiment shone more brightly than the sun, and was whiter than any snow. This is sort of interesting because in the Bible, we're told that Yahweh cannot be viewed by human eyes, because if you're in his presence, you will collapse and fall apart. And, we can argue that this is not Enoch literally in his presence. He's having these visions. He's dreaming. And if that's the case, and if we just kind of go with the mythology setup here, it sort of makes sense now that no human would be able to witness Yahweh. If this is how this guy hangs out, that he's just covered in fire, and his face, or what would be his body or skin, is so blindingly white that it would burn your retinas just to attempt to view him, that being in his presence causes you to freeze and burn at the same time. That's pretty intense, right? It kind of explains when nobody can look at him. And it kind of explains that weird description in Exodus where Moses views Yahweh's back parts, the back side of him. Because if the front side of him is this like blazing insanity, kind of makes sense that he would turn away from him. So that sort of makes sense now, doesn't it? None of the angels could enter and could behold his face by reason of the magnificence and glory, and no flesh could behold him. Not even angels can be around this guy and visually see him. I mean, that's pretty intense. You know, not only humans with our physical bodies, with our physical limitations, we can't witness Yahweh's greatness, but neither can the angels who don't have physical bodies. Even they will be, I don't know, driven insane or vaporized or what have you. It doesn't really explain that. The interesting thing, though, is it does explain that nobody can be around Yahweh, but then in the next verse, it says, the flaming fire was round about him, and a great fire stood before him, and none around could draw nigh him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, yet he needed no counselor. So that's sort of an interesting idea, that he's actually, nobody can behold him, nobody can come near him, but also he's surrounded by individuals. It doesn't really explain who they are. It says the most holy ones who were nigh to him did not leave by night, nor depart from him, but then we don't actually get an explanation of who they are, okay, and why they're able to stand being in his presence. And until then I, Enoch, had been prostrate on my face, trembling, and the Lord called to me with his own mouth, and said to me, come hither, Enoch, and hear my word. And one of the holy ones came to me and waked me, and he made me rise up and approach the door, and I bowed my face downwards. So it's interesting that it says waked me, because it seems as if he is asleep and receiving this vision, and now at this point in verse 25, he's being woken up to this. So what he's not, he is dreaming, and then he wakes up and he's within his dream. Imagine how disorienting that would be, you know, if this was actually happening to Enoch. So in chapter 15, Yahweh is basically telling Enoch, hey man, don't worry about it. I'm not here to hurt you, but I do have some information for you to pass. Okay, so go to say to the watchers of heaven. So now Enoch has to go back to them. And he tells them this message. It's sort of interesting here. So, and go say to the watchers of heaven who sent thee to intercede for them, you should intercede for men, and not men for you. Wherefore have ye left the high, holy, and eternal heaven, and lain with women, and defiled yourself with the daughters of men, and taken yourself wives, and done like the children of earth, and begotten giants as your sons. Now, again, this is Yahweh laying the verbal smackdown, okay? He's basically saying, you guys, the watchers, you were supposed to be the ones helping out humans, and now you're asking a human to help you out? Pathetic. How the tables have turned. You know, you absolute fools. You have defiled yourself. You had everything you could ever want, and there was all this awesomeness and all this glory, and you just threw it away to be disgusting, to go cavorting with these humans and having these weird babies that have destroyed the earth. You're gross, you're nasty, you're disgusting. Like that's what Yahweh is saying to Enoch to tell the watchers. So this continues on. And though ye were holy, spiritual, living the eternal life, you defiled yourselves with the blood of women, and begotten children with the blood of flesh, and, as the children of men, have lusted after flesh and blood, as those who also die and perish. Therefore have I given them wives, that they might also impregnate them and beget children by them, and thus nothing might be wanting for them on earth. But you were formerly spiritual, living the eternal life, and immortal for all generations of the world. And therefore I have not appointed wives for you, for as the spiritual ones in heaven is their dwelling. And all of this is basically saying, you guys didn't need wives. That's why I didn't give you wives. If I wanted you to have wives, y'all would have had wives. You didn't need them. You wouldn't have them. You know, you used to be eternal and living in a blissful area. And then what? You can't have it both ways. If you want to act a fool on earth, I'm going to leave you on earth to be foolish. That's kind of what Yahweh is saying here. So this continues on where he just keeps insulting them and basically says that one of the final sort of insulting things and also just mythologically interesting things here comes in verse 11. And the spirits of the giants afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on the earth, and cause trouble. They take no food, but nevertheless hunger and thirst, and cause offenses. And these spirits shall rise up against the children of men, and against the women, because they have proceeded from them. The reason this is mythologically interesting is because when we think about the angels that were cast down into this region that becomes hell, we also consider that these are demons. These are the ones causing problems on earth. These are the ones causing the pain and the suffering, the war and jealousy and all of that stuff that happens on earth. It's because of these demons. But instead, this actually shows it is the children of the Watchers, so the giants. They are dead. Yahweh killed them. Their souls are trapped on earth to do nothing but wander around and cause chaos. So now imagine that you're the Watcher. Again, all of this is awful. You've witnessed the murder of your children, the murder of your wives, the death, the wholesale death of everything that you cared about on earth. And also now, even in death, even after death, your children are trapped on earth, causing suffering to more of your beloved humans. What a punishment. This was not just, hey, you guys don't want to be in heaven? Fine, you can go be in hell. It's not that. This is such a physical torment for the Watchers, because they're bound and then they have to be burned and those types of things. They're physically tormented in hell. And also psychologically and emotionally tormented. This is such a complete destruction of anything the Watchers had ever held dear. It's really, really jarring. And so the last chapter that we're going to cover here is from the days of slaughter and the destruction and death of giants, from the souls of whose flesh the spirits, having gone forth, shall destroy without incurring judgment. Thus they shall destroy until the day of consummation and the great judgment. Okay, so all of this is basically saying their souls will be trapped on earth forever until all souls are going to be judged. If you are familiar with Abrahamic religions, there's this concept of Judgment Day, and there's a lot of misunderstanding between the Abrahamic religion and also the afterlife. So for some people, when they talk about things like near-death experiences, for example, they'll talk about having seen heaven or sometimes having seen hell, and because of that, they become stronger in their faith in Christianity, for example. But in actuality, reading the text, not just from the Christian text, but also the Jewish text and the Quranic text, if you read it, it says that when you die, your soul just is there in your body. And then on the day of judgment, everybody is judged at the same time, and then you are sent to a certain place. Most humans are actually not going to heaven. They're going to be on a new earth. And so that the idea of just going to heaven as soon as you have a near-death experience, let alone as soon as you die, that is not at all biblical, Quranical, Toranical. So that has nothing to do with what the actual text says. And so now we can see here is that a reference that someone who is studying these texts would be familiar with, the Day of Judgment. So these spirits now, instead of residing peacefully, that's where the rest in peace concept comes from, because the idea was that when you died, your soul is resting until Judgment Day. So rest in peace was this hope that between now and the time of judgment, that your soul can be at rest. So that was this idea of rest in peace. These children of the Watchers, these giants, even though they've died, they cannot rest in peace. They are tormented souls stuck on earth, tormenting other souls. You can almost think about it as the Japanese concept of like a grudge ghost, right? If you've ever seen those types of movies, the grudge ghost is basically a ghost that gets stuck in an area. So they're haunting a home, a building, or something like that. And they just kill whoever's there. There's really no build-up. I have a hard time watching those movies because there's not a ton of plot as far as I see it. because there's no way to resolve the grudge ghost, there's no way to get rid of the grudge ghost, and it doesn't matter what kind of person is there, it doesn't matter what they're going through, the grudge ghost will just kill you. That's just what it does. So it has no, even though it's from a human, it almost seems to have no human qualities in terms of thinking rationally, selecting appropriate targets, mercy, or anything like that. So it just seems like an unthinking, just killer. And that's kind of what we can think of as these watcher children souls. They're here, they're upset, they cannot be at rest, and they're just taking out their stress on everybody else. So it's kind of unfortunate for them. And so one of the last things that Yahweh leaves them with is this really, again, psychologically damaging kind of thing. You have been in heaven, but all the mysteries had not yet been revealed to you. And you knew worthless ones, and these in the hardness of your hearts you have made known to the women, and through these mysteries women and men work much evil on earth. Say to them, therefore, you have no peace. This basically meant that even the information on metallurgy, on astronomy, on all of this stuff that the Watchers had given to humans, even that information, it's just going to hurt them. Yahweh's basically saying there are so many wonderful mysteries that humans will never understand. And quite frankly, I didn't even tell you guys any really big ones. You guys had some sort of like low-level mysteries, you know. Even in doing that, even in sharing this information, you actually did more harm than good, because the information you gave to humans was not complete. Because it was not complete, and because it was never meant for them, they're going to take your concept of metalworking and use it to kill each other. They're going to take your concept of astronomy and use it against each other. They're going to take your concept of herbal healing and, you know, traditional medicine stuff and use it to poison each other. So not only are you doing something that I asked you not to, and you're going to be punished, and the women that you made your wives are punished, and your children are punished by murder, and then on top of that their souls are punished until judgment day. On top of that, you can lie there in hell knowing that even the information that you gave to better humankind, even that was wrong, and that's going to hurt them. Man. So far in this, Yahweh's greatness is only in his ability to cause suffering, quite frankly. That's all we're seeing here, is this huge ability to cause suffering. So that is that, and hopefully this has been enjoyable. So we are going to start on the next chapter later on, and if you are interested in supporting what I do, you can check out my Patreon. You can also join us in Discord, where I post updates to, hey, we're having a live stream around this time, here's a link, or, you know, that sort of thing. So you can get more of a heads up if you wanted to join us with the live stream. But anyway, have fun, hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.